My name is Olivia, and I'm excited to share a beautiful story with you. You see, I've witnessed how God is a part of our daily life, if we allow Him to be. He cares about every breath we take. He loves you. This story is about my best friend and how God used him, a lowly donkey, to do big and great things. You see, when I was a baby, my mom and dad were given a baby donkey to help carry me around. His name was Havivi, which means friend and dearly loved in Hebrew. He was my best friend. He was always by my side and watched over me. There was no better friend. I told Havivi everything, and he shared great stories of his adventures. It's true, he could talk just like the donkey in the Bible, Numbers 22, verse 28. You really should read that story. You see, that will remind you that with God anything is possible. And oh, Havivi was a special gift from God. One day my father said that God told him that we needed to give Havivi to our neighbor Joseph, that he had an important job to do. He had to carry Joseph's wife and her unborn child to Bethlehem. They had to go and register for the king. So his new master, Joseph, brought Havivi out of the field to the front door. As he led him, he talked to him gently and brushed his coat of fur at his neck and scratched him between his ears, all his favorites. Havivi now loved Joseph so much. He always knew that he was a kind man, but now he witnessed it because Joseph took such great care of him. As Havivi stood at the front door, Joseph began to pack his back with bags for him to carry. He tried to stay still as the load was getting heavier. Each time Joseph tied another bag, he would pat Havivi's side or rub his nose so he knew he was doing it right. Havivi watched as Joseph went in and out of their home, just waiting to see what was next. And then she appeared. She was radiant, and he knew that she was carrying something very special within her. He could smell her scent, and it was something he had smelled before. That scent was right before I was born. But this time, it was a scent that brought with it the feeling of peace and joy and great things ahead. Joseph then took a large rock and placed it next to Havivi, and she, Mary, stepped on it, and Joseph lifted her up upon his back. Now first he thought with all the other bags it might be too much for him, too heavy. But in an instant he felt something strange. He felt that he was being held up, and the load was so light. He tried to explain it to me, but no words could truly describe the strength given to him at that moment. He knew he was not alone. Havivi didn't know where he was going, but it didn't matter because he trusted them, and he would go anywhere with them. He knew that this was the most precious cargo he would ever carry. So as he walked, he watched every single step, making sure not to slip nor fall. They walked as the sun rose and as the sun began to fall from the sky. But he was not once tired. Every time hills became steep, sharp rocks tumbled beneath his feet, he would hear her voice, Mary's heavenly voice. She would whisper in his ear and then take her hand and brush his fur. Her touch was a touch of a mother. Havivi was feeling love around him like never before. Now on the road they were not alone. Crowds of people were heading the same way. Along the journey, his master, Joseph, would stop to let someone pass, and then he would rub Havivi's nose and then talk to Mary. He enjoyed how gentle their words were to one another. The longer they walked, the more often they would stop and check on her. Sometimes they would shift a bag or reposition her, and then they were off again. When they arrived in the town, there were donkeys and people everywhere. It was so busy that some donkeys were jittery and kicking their feet and pulling back and bumping into one another, and people were yelling. But not Havivi. He stayed behind his master and carefully followed him everywhere he stepped. They were just three in a sea of people, but they were never bumped, yelled at, pushed, and not once did Havivi trip or slip on the cobblestone streets. It was like they had their own path that no one else could take, and they walked through like a gentle breeze. Now the sun was down and the air was cold. Joseph stopped at a doorway and motioned Havivi to stay. He disappeared for only a moment and came back and looked at her and shook his head. Joseph's eyes revealed that he was concerned. Before they moved on, he covered her with another blanket. Over and over he stopped and would disappear into a doorway and then come back. Each time his face looked more sad, and he would just shake his head. Havivi described how Mary began shifting her weight more and more, so he knew she was uncomfortable. He tried to move slowly and gracefully for her. He loved her and knew each step he made was important for her safety and the child. They came to what had to be the last door in the city, and now Havivi too was holding his breath, hoping for good news. Joseph did return with a smile on his face. It was then they were led behind the building, and there was a simple barn. Havivi just thought they were going to place him there for the night. But then Joseph began to help Mary off of his back. He untied the bags and let them fall to the ground. Now, he knew that they were all preparing to stay the night. But why in this simple barn? Well, Mary began to fluff the hay and began to wrap up in her blankets and snuggled in because now the air was cold. They were also tired from their journey and began to drift off to sleep. All at once, though, he heard a rustle, and there was a gentle breeze and a beautiful smell and a new sound in the barn, one familiar to Havivi. Remember, he was close by when I was born so many years ago. And now he heard the sound of a newborn baby, and they called him Jesus. And high in the sky, a star lit up the night like a diamond over the simple little barn. Now that night there were shepherds in the field attending their sheep. An angel of the Lord appeared and told them the great news that their Lord and Savior were born in the city of David, called Bethlehem. Filled with joy, they began their journey to this holy place to see with their own eyes. The shepherds arrived quietly, and a small shepherd boy knelt beside Jesus and began to sing sweetly in his ear to bring him honor. More and more people came in that night. Havivi loved Mary, Joseph, and this sweet child so deeply. He knew it was his duty to watch over all of them. So with his nose, he snuggled in right next to Jesus. Now, not only shepherds heard of this great night, but King Herod sent the 3 wise men to see this precious child. As soon as the men saw the star, a great joy filled their hearts, and they bowed down to the King of Kings. They all sat in silence as they watched this newborn baby. A glow shined around him, and it was as if they could feel the warmth from that beautiful light. Another small little boy quietly slipped in beside the little shepherd boy, and on his drum he began to keep time. The shepherd boy was humming, and the gentle beat of the drum was like heavenly music that soothed their souls. Oh, what a night it had been, and now it was time to go to sleep. Havivi watched as Mary tucked the blankets around Jesus, and then soon wrapped herself and Joseph in their own blankets to protect them from the cold midnight air. As Havivi began to close his eyes, he saw Mary get up from her bed, and she walked over to him. She cupped her hands and placed them under his nose and put her head against his and said, "Havivi, thank you. You served God well. I love you." Mary then led Havivi back to Jesus and said, "Will you please watch over my son tonight? I'm so very tired." And so he obeyed and snuggled into the hay right beside Jesus and just watched every breath he took. As Havivi watched over all of them, he began to realize how God used him, a lowly donkey, for the greatest gift of this world. He marveled at how the day he was called from the pasture, there were many God could have called for this moment, but for some reason God called him. This journey was one that he would never forget. It was this time in his life he knew there was a God. He gave God credit for their safety. He would recall how he would hear God's voice in his ears with words comforting and encouraging him and giving him strength that he needed, that was required for this long journey. But sitting in the dark night, Havivi looked at this tiny baby, and he just knew that he had come to save the world. Now that part of the journey may be over, but there was so much more to come. As I told you before, Havivi was my best friend. He loved me, and so he needed me to hear these words. He told me, remember that Jesus is always near, and to never be afraid, and always look for God's hope in my life. This is a message for all of you too. You see, life can be hard and confusing, but we always have Jesus. We all make mistakes in life, but He will never leave us and will always love us. Havivi has really made me think about my own life and what is God calling me to do? Does God have something for me and you? Of course He does. Hearing Havivi's story, I began to realize he could have been like those other donkeys in Bethlehem. Remember? They were pulling away and kicking and even fussing, and they wanted out of there. But no, Havivi obeyed God and listened to Him. Remember, He told us that he stayed behind his master. And because he did, his steps were safe and he had strength for what God was calling him to do. And they made it to exactly where they were supposed to be. Do you think God will give us that kind of safety and strength? Oh, yes, He will. But what do we do? And how do we get started? Well, as Havivi had to share his story with me, I want to share something with you. You see, many years ago I had a dream, and God showed me what my name meant. and he told me to share the meaning with children around the world. Are you ready to hear it? I'm going to spell out my name, and each letter will help you on your own journey in life. Here we go. O means to obey God. You see, God will call you to do great things in life. Things that you'll be so blessed if you just follow Him. Maybe it is a nudge to help someone, or maybe make a card, I don't know, but ask God to show you. L means to love Him with your whole heart. Begin to talk to God every day, and He will show you His love, and you will come to know that He is the greatest love. I means to invest in the gifts God has given you. I'm talking about talents and skills and time and even money. Let me ask you, what can you talk about and do and never get tired of? Ask God if somehow you can use that to do really wonderful things for Him. V means vow to serve Him. Once you begin to understand your talents, commit to use them to serve Him. You'll be so glad you did. It'll be more fun than any game you ever played. I mean to imagine. Imagine the possibilities in life. In Matthew 19:26, we learn that with God, all things are possible. Start to believe that God is going to do great things in your life, and He will. A means always know that God is with you. You are never alone. I mean, here I am talking about a donkey, and probably will the rest of my life. Silly, right? Will people make fun of me? Yes, they have, and of course they will. But God is always with me, and because I am trusting Him and seeking Him, I know it's what I'm called to do. And I get to share this story with you. What an honor this is for me. Well, our time has come to an end, but never forget how God called a simple little donkey to do such a great big thing. Now, if He cared enough about a donkey, just imagine what great big fun plans He has for you. Your first job is to trust Him. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have been blessed. And remember to always be a blessing to others. Your friends forever, Olivia and Havivi.